Hello, my name is Brian, spelled with Y, and today I'm going to be going through a software demo of this code that I just wrote. So, I wrote this over the past 2 weeks. It is a program that will virtually roll dice so you can play Dungeons and Dragons. I wrote it in Rust, which is it's a pretty tough language to learn. It does all the memory management kind of behind the scenes, but also in a really fast way, and the way it does that is through this complicated system of ownership and borrowing, and different functions own different variables at different times. It's really confusing, but that makes it a lot faster. At least that's what the Rust developers like to say. And I thought it would be really cool if I learned how to do this a little bit. And so, without further ado, let's get into the demo. So, let's say, let me run the program real quick. So, let's say you are playing Dungeons and Dragons. A bit of a long shot, I guess, for some of you, but let's say you're doing it and you're playing a monk and you're fighting a goblin. And so it's your turn, and what you do is you roll to hit, as you all know. And so for that, you would just type the roll command, and then you got a 10. Let's say your dex modifier is +3 or something. Goblins have kind of a lame armor class, so you connect, and then you would roll the damage. And for monks, that is at low levels, that is 1d4 plus dex modifier. So to roll a d4, you would type roll space 4, not 45, that would deal way too much damage. Roll 4, and as you can see in this example, the 4 is underlined bright green, and there's a exclamation mark by it. That is what happens when you roll a number that is equal to the maximum possible number that it is possible, the maximum possible number for the dice that you are rolling. And let's say that right after this, the goblin dies and drops a bag of beans. And you're like, whoa, a bag of beans, because beans are awesome. And you decide to throw a bean on the ground, and to find out what happens, you roll a d100. So for that, you would type roll 100, and then it kind of does this. This is a cool effect that I've thought of. As you can see, the 100 there was also underlined and had an exclamation mark. And you got an 80. Let me quickly research what that would be. I should have had this tab prepared before I started recording this, but that's okay. All right, from Open5e, the number 80 triggers a fruit tree that grows. It has 1d10 plus 20 fruit. We can calculate that real quick. Roll 10. It has 29 fruit, and 1d8 of them will act as randomly determined potions. So we'll roll 8. And cool, 8 potions. And 1 acts as an ingested poison. Yeah, it's pretty cool. That's one of my favorite bag of beans effects, just because of the potentiality for really wacky potions, like giant strength, potion of enlargement, or whatever it's called. So yeah, pretty rad. But I know what you're thinking. So this program can roll dice and format them in an incredibly amazing way. Is that all it does? No, it is not. You see, if you type clear and press enter, it clears the screen. Wow. If you type a command that does not exist, it says command not found because it didn't find the command. If you type help, it displays a really helpful help screen. And if you type exit, the program ends. That's my least favorite command, because the program ends. But yeah, that's what the software does. I'm planning to add some more functionality, so keep an eye on the Git repo that is linked in the description of the video. Keep an eye on that if you're interested in programs that can run that can roll D&D dice for you. Pretty rad. So now let's take a brief glance at how this code works. So as you can tell, how this program was set up is that I was essentially running my own command line with commands and functions that these commands can execute, commands which are triggered by a keyword, and then arguments, and some arguments are default, like if you just type roll, you get a 20. So yeah, so I did that using a system that I actually hashed out briefly in Python, which is way easier to work with than Rust, as you can probably guess. And in Rust, that translates to these structs and commands and whatnot. So I have a struct called command, which has a keyword which activates it, and a callback, which is the function which is called when it detects the string. And then command has this function called verify, and you pass it the list of arguments. So if I type roll 53, for example, then that's parsed in a different part of the program and passed in as roll and 53 in a vector, or I guess roll and 53 in a vector. And how that works, and then it's passed over here to verify, and then it checks the first argument in the command string, and if it to lowercase is equal to the keyword, I always make sure to put the keywords, and when I'm implementing, I always make sure to put the keywords as lowercase so that they will work. If it's equal to the keyword, then it calls the callback and returns true. And this return true is important because down here in the command line object, it has this thing called input cycle, and it checks when it uses the return true value to make sure that a command has been found, because I want it to get back to the user if it found no commands and say, hey, I didn't find anything. And it uses this return true to determine if it found any commands or not. And over here we have this called arg command, which is pretty much the same. I'll probably learn about how to do polymorphism in Rust and have command and arg command as kind of the same thing, like with some inheritance, they kind of own each other, that sort of thing. But Rust is primarily not an object-oriented language. As I've demonstrated, you can do some object-oriented stuff, but it's not object-oriented in and of itself. So inheritance and polymorphism are pretty tough. So this arg command, it has a keyword and a callback, just the same, as you know, but it also has this default arguments option, which means if I'm verifying, like over here in the function verify, if I verify that the first word in the vector is the right word and I need to activate, but there's nothing else, there's no other arguments, then I'm just thinking, what do I do now? And what we do is we send in the default argument. So for example, the only arg command I have is roll, is the roll command over here. And the default command, the default argument for roll it's wrapped up here in a really complicated way, but the default, because of how Rust works, it's very strongly typed. The default here is 20 in a string, which is the second item in a vector of strings. It's very confusing, but that is how it has to be. And that means that if you type roll and nothing else, then you get a number between 1 and 20. That is the exact same as typing roll 20. Now, as you can probably tell, as the numbers roll past, then they're all different colors. And that's done using a clever little bit of code I'm rather proud of. I hashed this system out in Python, which is way easier to think about than Rust. And so down here, now that's the display. Here it is. It looks like I had it collapsed. So over here, if you roll a nat 1, no matter what, then it prints red, dim, bold, italic. as a 1. Here, let me quickly, I can demonstrate that easily because I can trust my luck to never get a nat 1 when I actually want to show off 1. So I can test this easily by typing roll 2. Of course, it's a 2. It's a 1. There we go. See, it's dim. You can hardly see it even. It's dim, it's bold, it's italic, it's red to show you, yeah, you're in trouble, pal. That's a nat 1. If you get a bottom third, like this, then it's bold and red. Everything is bold in the results. I think it shows up really nice against all the input strings. If you get in the middle third, you can see some of the numbers going past in case this isn't right. Yeah, this some of the, if you get in the middle third, it's yellow and bold. If you get in the top third, like 15 out of 20, then it's bold and green. But if you get a maximum, like I did with this 2, then it's underlined. There's an exclamation mark, and I have a little bit of error handling here in case, I mean, I don't know under what circumstances this would happen, but in case something happens, then just don't format it. It's always wise to have a default condition, preferably one that's distinctive from the others, so that if you get this default condition, then you're like, something's gone wrong with this, and it's a little bit easier to figure out. Then it'll point you in the direction of where to fix it. You'll know that something's up with your conditional statements. And so the last thing is that this command line, it just owns a bunch of argument commands. It has a command list and an argument command list. These two should be the same thing, but that would require polymorphism, which I did not, unfortunately, have time to learn. But what it does is it loops during the input cycle. It loops through it gets the user's input and parses the user's input and passes this input in to the verify methods of our commands in the command lists. So it checks the commands first. Well, actually, what it does first is it checks it against quit, exit, and queue, which are our exit commands. I have multiple because I can never remember if I should type quit or exit, so I just implement both. And these have to be outside. They have to be outside of command functions because they have to influence this loop directly. Plus, whatever type of command line you have, I think an exit condition is definitely a good thing to have. And so if it finds a command, then it will continue on to the next loop, but if not, it will check all of our arg commands, and if it doesn't find the command after all of that, then it says, hey, I didn't find anything, in red, to show you it was an error. Yeah, last thing. So the reason why this took so long, I mean, it's a pretty simple program, but it took kind of a long time because I was doing this in such a way that this library, or crate as they're called in Rust, I could technically use this to build any type of command line functionality that I wanted. It doesn't have to be Dungeons and Dragons. It could be, I suddenly can't think of anything. You could use it to play sounds. Like you could type play Mario noise, and behind the scenes it could go like Yahoo or something. So you could use this functionality, maybe a little bit of tweaking depending on what you need, but for the most part this is it's a decent library. I need to do more error handling before I send it out into the real world, as it were, but you could use this for a bare bones command line library if you needed that. So next time you want to make a simple command line program, consider clicking on the link to the repo that is in the description. And with that, thanks for watching. I'm gonna roll a 64-sided die, and it's a It's a 13. Naturally unlucky, but hey, it's almost October, so that is the perfect number to end on. With that, thanks very much for watching. hope you enjoyed this video and some code. I might make an update video once I improve this code some, show you off some rolling with disadvantage or maybe syntax highlighting. We'll see how that turns out. So yeah, that's it.